Hello, everyone. Thank you for stopping by. Today we're talking about a game called Raft. Raft is an open world survival game, similar to, in some ways, to Subnautica or to Ark Survival or Rust, in that you have to build a base of operations and basically just try and survive. The game does have a basic storyline, and like Subnautica, you'll have to follow it through. And you can do this in a co-op mode with your friends. I played the game solo, but I am sure it's enjoyable either way. So, whichever way you choose, it's I'm fairly sure it's going to be a good experience. The storyline mode itself does not run very long. I believe it's about 25-30 hours on average. I've played roughly about 174 hours of this game, and that's mainly due to the building options for the raft itself. And there are some very interesting mechanics to how you build your raft and how do you configure it and how do you maximize your space. And so that itself can add time to your overall gameplay. Now, this is not meant to take anything away from the storyline, but if your main interest lies in designing the raft, I think that is where you'll get the most out of this game. Now, if you're interested in the story, there's no need to fret, as there is talk of Chapter 3 within this dev blog that was posted on the community forum, so if you want to take a look at that, feel free to do so. With that out of the way, I think we should get started and take a look at some of the gameplay, as well as some hints on how to play the game. In this section, we're basically going to be covering some of the raft layout, and here you can see how the first portion of the floor is structured with the smelters and water purification systems, among other things. Lots of the storage is actually located at the bottom of the ship, or of the raft. This is a fairly common practice, as due to the game's design, the very first floor is very prone to flooding. So a lot of ship designs tend to have this bottom floor to essentially place the core elements of the ship, just as it is shown here. For example, here we have a paint mill, and it is placed here because it needs access to the bottom floor, as it needs to rotate in order to generate the paint. Now over here on this side we have what is essentially the engine room of the raft. There's about 6 engines here, and so far I found that there are plenty of power to generate what is needed. If you look along the bottom here as well, you'll notice that all of the piping is running through the ship, and we'll cover a little bit more on this later. Also on this side, we have simple collection nets that we use to gather as many resources as we can, especially when sailing. It is a good way to collect as many items as possible, as you'll need them to augment the ship. And over here we have our stationary anchor. Now if we move along to the side of the ship, we have our side deck, but you can get a view of the outside very easily without falling off. If we head upstairs, we have several compartments here. The first one is where we keep all of the crops. It is very basic, but it fulfills most of the cooking needs of the ship. As you can see here, we have most of the seeds that we use for even generating power for the raft. Over to the left here, we have our livestock, and continuing to the right, we have our beehives. Beehives are used to generate honey, which in turn generate power for the vessel, but this is going to be explained a little bit more later. With that in mind, I think we also need to talk about how storage works. Initially, you start with some really basic containers, but as you move along, you'll get into these heavier containers, which allow you to really track and better organize the contents of your vessel. And which also helps with the manufacturing process. Um, Obviously, the way I handle things may be different than some others, but to me, it makes sense to keep certain things in certain places. And as you can see here, everything's organized more according to function and location, just for easier access. Now, as we move along to the third level of the raft, we see where we keep basically the living area of the vessel. To the left, we have the kitchen area, along with storage, recipes, sleeping quarters, as well as the navigation systems. Now, as we go up to the final floor, this gives us the opportunity to cover wind sailing. Now, wind sailing is not particularly difficult. I mean, you just point the sail in a direction that obviously the wind is pointing to, as you can see here. Of course, not forgetting to lift the stationary anchor. As you can see here, the ship is already in movement and we are on our way. And it's always fun to kind of just go along with the ship. Sometimes you use the engine, sometimes you use the wind sail to conserve power. So either way you do it is completely fine. If you have more resources for engine power, you use the other one. So we'll be doing both. A little bit later, we'll show how to use the engine to navigate as well. And one of the things you enjoy a lot about this game is sort of letting the sail take you to just some random place and some random location. It's always fun to see where you might end up. Now, one of the crucial components about this game is obviously the survival aspect, and you need to eat. So what do you do for that? Well, there's a lot of mechanics that actually aid with that. You can fish, you can capture birds, and one of the best ways to do that is to build a nest on the vessel. And as you can see here, there's a nesting bird, and we're gonna kill it and collect some of the resources from it in order to add to our food supply. And we're talking about survival. Another key component is obviously water, and there's several systems in this vessel to deal with that. One is the basic water purifier, the other one's the advanced water purifier. Once you get farther along, you get the electric one, and either one will work in a survival situation. But we'll talk a little bit about water purification in a little bit here. And our goal for this section will be to find another island and essentially harvest its resources. But first we have to navigate to it and find steer the raft into the correct location for upboarding and to maximize getting the resources for that location. Now, as you can see here, we have our first sighting for the next island we're going to focus on for our resource gathering. Now for this part, we're gonna speed up the video a little bit, just basically show how to steer the ship into the correct location. But you'll see the initial approach and how to best get close to anchor onto the island. Now, one of the things you want to do here is obviously kind of lean into the wind. That way it's easier for you. If you're on a sail, it's easier for you to leave the island as well. So it's far easier to just focus on flowing with the current rather than against it. Otherwise, if you don't have a sail, for example, you'll have to paddle out of the island itself, and it'll become that much more difficult. Now, some of you may be noticing the reinforced foundation here. The reason for that is that sharks do not attack reinforced foundations at all. So early on in the game, or as soon as you can, it would be helpful to actually get this installed on your ship so you can avoid shark attacks, or constant shark attacks. Next, we're going to tackle island resources. So one of the first things I like to do when I start on an island is use a metal detector in order to see what treasures you can find, and often enough you'll find titanium and several other different types of bounty, which can either be useful to either for your design of your ship or just to augment it. So the process is fairly simple. Just follow the signal until it pings solid, and you'll find the actual treasure. Now, what's often interesting is that sometimes you'll find them in weird locations, such as a sharp edge, or as it is the case here. So you often have to look around and get the right spot. Now, when you dig up treasures, you'll either find safes, you'll find briefcases, and most of the time the safes are the best type of treasure to find, as it has the most contents, as you can see in this instance. But there are different types, and some can be just random junk. Now, another key resource you're going to be needing is wood, and lots of it. So islands are perfect for collecting wood, as well as plastic and some other items, fruits, and many other types of resources. But definitely you want to get a lot of wood at the very beginning of the game, as it's going to help to augment your raft. Now, as you can hear here, there's a warthog running around here. You have to be extremely careful with these, as they are, as you can see, not very friendly. Now, not forgetting to mention the screecher up above. You certainly don't want to deal with these two characters at the same time, because you'll run into this type of situation. You'll want to deal with them individually, one at a time. Since he's coming from the air, and for that for the most part, you'll use a bow and arrow. And in this instance, I have to retreat and regroup until I can do that. Now, just as a side note, you can avoid the screecher as well as the boar by jumping into water. Now, you have to be careful. You have to be in constant movement, because if the screecher goes above your position on the water, it will hit you directly. And if you do get hit to that point, you'll definitely want to have some healing salve. And this will help mitigate the problem until you can correct your approach to getting these mobs. Now we'll make a comeback to the screecher and the warthog a little bit later, but for now I want to focus on another section, which is caves. Now, caves have lots and lots of good resources as well, especially when you're starting out. For example, you'll need things like dirt, and which is what we see here. You'll need a shovel in order to get the contents out of the hole. and you'll find many different things. Most of them will be basic. In addition to that, you'll also find mushrooms in caves, which are very useful in certain types of cooking recipes, such as the catfish deluxe, coconut chicken, mushroom omelet, or the shark dinner, which is my favorite. It's one of the ones that generate the most nutrition for the meal you're intaking. In a little while, we'll also be covering how to deal with the shark as well. In addition to these dirt holes, you'll also find containers which have a lot of different materials which are very useful for your building needs. And as you can see here, my inventory is full, so it's very crucial that before you leave your ship, you make sure you store everything that you need. And now we return to screechers. There's a couple of ways to deal with screechers. Obviously, you can deal with them from the ground or from above. The best way to deal with them, I found, is from above. You can obviously hit them from anywhere, but as far as to the easiest way to deal with them is from a higher altitude on the island. But as you can see here, they can be hit fairly easily from the ground as well, as long as you adjust your aim to slightly above their heads. One thing you definitely want to do is make sure that you, as you're hitting the target over the head, you move out of the way of the boulder. Because if you don't quickly move out of the way, you'll definitely get hit by it, and you'll have damage inflicted. As you can see here, I've run out of arrows, so another crucial item you must do is make sure you have enough supplies whenever you're hunting for island resources, so you don't have to, so you avoid multiple trips to your raft. As you can see here, the crafting system is fairly simple. It's very straightforward. Everything, as long as you have the recipe, everything is outlined for you, so there's no difficulty in generating the items you need. The process is completely straightforward. Just as a small side note, these water purifiers, whether it's the simple or the advanced, they're going to be crucial in just as a matter of survival within the game. So if you want to make the game a little bit simpler for you, it's best to get those blueprints as quickly as you can. Now, it is crucial to also equip yourself whenever you're going resource hunting, especially when you're facing the Screecher or the Warthog, because it is very important to at least have some sort of protection available, as it'll mitigate some of that damage. Another important thing to note is the condition of your weapons. I notice here that my spear was in need of was in disrepair, so I basically just created another one just so I would avoid having to come back once more. And with that completed, we'll continue the hunt for the Screecher, and at this point we're going to take the high altitude approach to make the process just that much simpler. Now, as you are moving throughout the island, it is also crucial to gather other resources as well, as in larger islands you'll find many different types of fruits and some of the rare cooking items that you'll need. Before I mentioned the mushrooms, there's also berries and like I said, all sorts of different items you'll need in for at least your cooking recipes. Now, as you're making your approach to the screecher, it's important to keep looking up, as it can surprise you from time to time. Although if you see him from a distance, it's very easy to, as it is here, to pinpoint it and get into a good position before you get ready to strike. Now you'll want to get to the highest point you can and start pre-aiming him. He will land, and sometimes you can hit the screecher while it's on the ground, but sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. So I usually just wait until he gets to a certain point and just aim right above his head, and it's usually a hit at that point. And now we'll continue the process until the screecher is eliminated. And with that, this creature is done, and we can go down and collect the resources. One thing the screecher drops is the head of the screecher, which you can mount on a wall as a trophy, or you can wear. Choice is yours on that one. Now, it will also drop some raw feathers as well as some drumsticks, as you can see here. Now we're going to go on to dealing with the warthog itself, which is this creature is not particularly difficult to deal with. You can kill him in many different ways. I found one of the easiest is to, because he has a charge, is to drop down in the water and just wait until he strikes, and then pull out of the water and kill it. You can also do it very easily with a bow and arrow, but as you can see here, it'll charge, and then as it charges, it'll stop, and that's when you want to strike. As soon as the warthog is dead, it'll drop some raw meat, some leather, as well as a warthog head, which you can use as a trophy, or you can use as a cosmetic. Now, prior to this next section, we're going to do some prep work, as we'll be capturing some livestock. So for this, we'll need a net launcher, as well as some canisters in order to capture the livestock we need. As you can see here, the food bar is actually running fairly low, and so we'll also be covering some of the best nutrition sources you can use, or at least one of them, so you can maximize the level of nutrition for your character. Now, one of the recipes you can use to really maximize the nutrition for your character is the shark recipe, because it generates so much nutrition per item serving. Now, initially, most of what you'll eat is potatoes and beets, but as soon as you can start killing sharks, I would recommend that as the best way to mitigate hunger. Now that our character's hunger is mitigated, let's move on to capturing livestock. Now, the way to do this is with a net canister and a launcher, and there's probably many approaches to this. You could either take the ranged approach or up close. I think for me, close range tends to work better. As you can see in the video here, there was a miss there, so we reattempt to capture from a close range. And the best way to do this is to get close and just trap it in a location and fire the deadlock. And there we have it. Now you have to carry the livestock from your location to the ship. So I recommend doing so after you've dealt with the Screecher and the Warthog, as those two will definitely impede you from getting the livestock to your ship effectively. Now, one of the things I wanted to discuss is shark aggravation distance. If you are close to the raft, the shark will aggro you almost immediately. However, if you keep a distance from it, it will actually stay away from you, so you're free to harvest resources as you need. So one of the things you want to do is dock the raft and then move away from it as far away as you can. And you will be able to harvest resources as you see fit. One key item to note is if you're on a smaller island, the aggravation distance for the shark will become far smaller, so you'll have to watch out for potential pitfalls. Now, prior to harvesting underwater resources, I cannot stress how important it is to have flippers as well as an oxygen bottle available to you, as it'll make harvesting of these resources far easier than going at it without these materials. Now, at the very beginning of the game, it's a little difficult to do that, so you'll have to stick to shallows. But as you're going deeper, the flippers and the O2 bottle will be very important. And as you can see here, once we've created distance from the raft and the shark, you are free to explore the rest of the underwater area for as many resources as you need. Some of the things you'll run into here, especially on medium to large islands, are poison puffers. Now, these poison puffers, not particularly difficult to deal with, but if you don't know, some might go at it with a spear or something like that, and you'll find out fairly quickly that this is the wrong way to do it, as it will explode if it gets too close to you. You'll definitely want to hit it with a bow and arrow, as it'll be easier to keep a distance from it. Best way to engage is to approach the puffer and then backtrack away from it as you're attacking it. So as you can see here, the bow breaks. I have to back away. The fish will automatically disengage, usually as long as you keep a distance away from it, and then you can re-engage. Once you kill it, the fish will drop some explosive goo, which is essential for the manufacturing of the canister nets, as well as a poison puffer head, which can be used as a cosmetic or can be used in a recipe called head broth, which is very useful which is a very effective recipe. So as we continue on here, we are looking for as many raw materials as we can. Now this is a large island, and based on the environment you're in, whether it's a small island, medium, or large, you'll find different sets of items on each. Now, just as a good example, you'll find clay, sand, rock, as well as scraps in most environments. As I said, when you're starting out, it's fairly simple to just stick to the smaller islands, and then as you gather the materials and tools you need, then move to the larger islands. Now, as you can see here in this section, we're approaching something called silver algae. Now, silver algae is used in certain recipes and can be very useful for overall substance. Now, what's interesting, sometimes it's not very easy to see. So, the game probably does not do the greatest job of outlining that this is an actual collectible item. So if you do notice it, make sure to collect it. Now, as you can see here, in this instance, we see a fair amount of ore located deep within this environment. Now, for this, you'll definitely need the oxygen bottle as well as flippers in order to collect the items. As the deeper you go, the harder it is to get back to the top without depleting your oxygen supply. Now, as we finish our resource run, we make our way back to the ship and drop off our items in order to start the next section. That should be noted that getting an electric purifier just like this one would prove very helpful early on. If you intend to survive long term and in order to just build your craft to its maximum capability, as it makes things just that much simpler. Now we're going to speed up the clip a bit just to kind of show you, now just to finish up the theme of resource collecting, it is also very important to collect as much as you can from every island. There's flowers you can use for painting, there's lots of fruits like mangoes and pineapples, there's trees which contain wood and coconuts, and which can all be used in fuel making process as well as food consumption. In general, like I said, it's just important to go through the island completely and maximize your efforts, at least insofar as it concerns resource gathering. So we've come to the point where I'm going to show you how to, I guess, in my opinion, best deal with a shark. I'm sure there's several different ways of dealing with it. Personally, I like to use a spear to take care of it. As I said, it helps you dive if the shark dives for some reason. The shark does tend to boost itself away from you, so it is important to give it chase and try to attack it from behind as much as possible. So as you can see here, the first thing we're doing is trying to locate it. And what I like to do is stand on the edge of the ship, allow it to get close, and then give chase as it approaches. So basically, it's let it approach, jump onto the ledge, and then give chase. Just like it is done here. At that point, I'm going to get behind the shark and try to just strike it as quickly as I can. Again, you will need the flippers for this. Otherwise, you will not be able to swim quite as fast as the shark will. And eventually, as you go along with it, you'll be able to kill it. Now, one other way to kill a shark early on in the game is to, while you're on the ledge of the boat, and as long as your raft is not armored in any way, or at least the foundations are not armored, the shark will attack the raft, and you can actually poke the shark with a spear as it's attacking. Now, it's not the most efficient way to do so, to kill a shark, but eventually you will kill it that way as well. Now, once the shark is dead, it will drop some shark meat as well as a shark head. Now, while the shark meat can be used in a recipe, I don't believe the shark head itself can. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, however, as I have not experimented with that at all. Now, just as another quick side note, the simple net collectors are very important that you get as many as you can early on, as they help you gather so many materials for the building of your raft. So if you have the materials to get these built, make sure you at least put a few on the sides of your raft so you can make sure you can collect as many resources as you can. Now for this very last section, and if you watch this far, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're going to cover engine sailing. And engine sailing, it's not particularly difficult, at least as it concerns the raft's navigation system. Once it's already set up, the process of getting from point A to point B is actually very easy. So our goal is to go to a certain predetermined location. In our case, it'll be the Vasagata. The entire point is just to show how to get from point A to point B. Once you have the point you want to head to identified on the navigational system, as simple as just turning on the engine and navigating to it by smoothly aligning the vessel to the correct point. Now here's a view of the engines as they are running. Be careful when you jump down. If you have 6 engines running at a time, if you fall off the boat, it'll be somewhat difficult to catch up to it. We'll want to align the raft along to the plot point that we're trying to reach. And it's simply just this is simply done just by manually adjusting the wheel to the midpoint of the navigational system. As time increases, then you should see the distance to that location gradually decrease. Now, one interesting item to note is that you will run from time to time into vacated rafts, which are just environmental elements. You will not be able to commandeer any of these rafts. As, like I said, they're just environmental pieces. They do contain some loot, and if you're able to catch one, you might as well grab it and see what you can salvage from it. Once you step onto the raft, it will sink immediately, so it's better to just quickly grab the items and just leave it. Now, it's always useful to check your fuel gauges to ensure that the engines are running properly. I at least like to do so a couple of times during the trip. And at this level of the game, there's not really much need to worry about biofuel, as you can generate it very easily. But it's always good to keep an eye on the gauges to make sure everything is running properly. Now, as you can see here, the battery has depleted from the navigation system, so it needs to be replaced. And this is something you'll run into frequently when you're using engine sailing. So it's important to keep an eye on these systems while you're sailing to make sure they're operational. Now these battery charging systems come in extremely handy. So as soon as you get blueprints for these, make sure you implement them, because they're very useful, especially when you have many systems relying on battery power. Now for this section, we're going to start speeding things up a bit, as a lot of the stuff that we're going to see here, it's a little bit more, part of the mundane portion of the journey. And finally, we are at the final approach for Vasagaton. It was a bit of a longer journey, but as you can see, it's not particularly difficult to do engine sailing, and it is very enjoyable. Now, prior to me concluding the video, I'd like to say that this game has certainly been an absolute joy. Very enjoyable. Would I recommend it? I think to most people I would. I think it's certainly an interesting it's certainly an interesting survival game where you can kind of get immersed fully into the environment. And I think that's a very interesting concept. And definitely, if you enjoy seascapes as much as I do, I think it'll definitely provide a reprieve from your daily toils, and it'll give you some inner peace to kind of get away from it all, at least for a little while. And that certainly makes this game worthwhile to me. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time. This is Cypher Alpha. I'm out of here.